Yep.
What's your outlook on banks as we're having some new reports, or one new report about the top banks, and the reports from Exotic Capital says there are reasons to be positive, looking at both the macro?
Absolutely. For us, we've always been, positive about the Nigerian banks. We've mentioned it over and over, the resilience of these banks. Come what may, the economy is booming, or the economy, in fact, the banks made more money in recession, and it's quite amazing. And for us, we are still positive on the performance or what to expect for the Nigerian banks. We know that the macro issues, the macroeconomic headwinds that we suffered in 2016 going into 2017, we first saw some recovery, actually affected the performance of these banks. But the major drag has been from the angle of non-performing loans, which is still high, but again, if you remove the outlier banks, it still appear to be within threshold for most of the banks. So NPL is something to worry about. But again, if you look at the sector exposure of each of these banks, you can begin to see some clear cases of improved activity. In the oil and gas space, for example, we know that this fall in global oil prices affected, most of the loans that have been created within the oil and gas space. But we're beginning to see a recovery in this space, and some of those loans are moving to performance stage.
For the banks, one of the issues raised is what you call the currency issue.
Correct.
And do you think we're beginning to see a bit of a shift with what happened over the last 1 week or 2 weeks, as Exotic Capital is looking at 360 to a dollar this year as an exchange rate that will likely impact the financial statements of the books? Of course, when there's a move in exchange rate, your NPL and what you call that provisioning also shift in terms of the numbers.
Depending on your dollar-denominated asset exposure.
Exactly. Is there something to keep in focus, perhaps not to be too worried about?
Well, for the banks, looking at the exchange rate factor, there are reasons to be worried. Looking at the development over the last 2-3 weeks, in terms of demand and supply, and the CBN's play in that market. You cannot overrule the impact of the CBN in that market. Clearly speaking, CBN has done so well in stabilizing the market, but the issues that market watchers want to be careful about is whether the CBN is still given to, a peg, so to speak, in the midst of all the different windows that we have for accessing foreign exchange. There was a story about the CBN governor conducting a check on the banks to ensure if
compliance,
compliance
sales,
to 360
yes.
rate. Again, for us, these are things that some foreign investors especially will be looking at, and even though there are positives within that market in terms of, how much you've built your reserves, in terms of how much the CBN has been able to support the market. But again, because we know that there is still a big elephant in the room, which is the oil market, the oil prices, which you cannot tell, even when the outlook looks positive. For any shock that, happens, it means that investors will start panicking by the time they see that the capacity of the CBN to support.
So in terms of exchange rate, do you think 360 to the greenback or the dollar, it looks like the new figure on the street that the bank should be looking at, not 353?
Well, that seems like click, but I think what the report you're referring to was trying to talk about is the reporting in their financials.
Yes.
You know that banks hold dollar-denominated or foreign currency-denominated assets. Of course, by the time exchange naira against the dollar moves, all other currencies, follow in line. So what you see is, as at the last time of reporting, they used 330 as the exchange rate for reporting their numbers. For example, if I'm a bank and I have up to 30% of my assets denominated in dollars or in foreign currencies, generally, whenever there is an exchange rate move, you see a jump in naira terms in terms of the assets I'm carrying. So if I have dollar-denominated assets that are not performing, when there is an exchange rate move to the downside, it also affects the value of non-performing loans that are in my book.
Yeah.
So if they use 330 as at the last time, what it seems like now, because apart from the 305 that is the official rate at which the CBN transacts with the IOCs or all other petroleum marketers, what you see in the market is something within that 330 to 360. So it seems like by the time we are ending this current financial year, the banks may have to, or the CBN may advise the banks, because on the advice of the CBN, to move towards using that 360 as an exchange rate. That again will have an impact. Remember that when we had that depreciation in 2016, that's when you saw most of the banks booking, very high non-performing loan. But some banks recorded it to the positive because they had gains in foreign currency, foreign currency assets, and that was booked as part of their income.
We're wrapping up, but let's take a look at the peaks. If you look at the banks, do you agree that among all the lenders, Zenith, UBA, and GT, Stanbic, and FB and H, including maybe Access Bank, those 5 or 6 come among the top? From
our own radar, there are 4 banks that we rate very high. Not necessarily in terms of the fundamentals that we have, analyzed. Because if you look at all the banks, pretty much there are 5 banks that are clearly distinguished in terms of their fundamentals, ranking by way of by the level of their ROE: Stanbic, GT, Zenith, Access, and UBA. For us, there are 4 top picks that we have, and this is in relation to how much of strategy they have to, the internal strategy they are putting in place vis-a-vis the results that we've seen in terms of their return on equity and how the market perceives, this stock. So clearly, Guarantee is it's top pick for us, but the issue with Guarantee is the pricing in the market currently, and even in the report you're referring to, Guarantee is still a highly priced, stock, by their own valuation. Yes. Only that the market price has shifted significantly.
Much lower than that of Zenith and
exactly.
UBA. Interesting.
Thank you.
Let's continue to have this conversation. Let's look for another day when the market moves, then you move. And head of research at AfroInvest, Robert Amontude. We'll take a break. When we come back, it's the world of plastic and the way forward.